tracked over 1,000 hours over 100 days and realized that I've been lying to myself about almost all of it. I thought I was productive, I had systems in place, and I said no to the things that didn't matter. Then I saw the data and it exposed the fake productivity I've been engaging in. This isn't a video about productivity hacks or time management tips. Instead, it's about the deeper reason why time management doesn't always work for everyone. If you've ever felt busy but somehow still stuck, like you're doing everything right but something's off, I think you really relate to what I'm about to share. For 5 years, I told myself that time was my most valuable asset. I built my whole approach to life using this very idea. Every hour had to count. Every day needed to be productive. And yet, despite having an endless to-do list and working on multiple projects concurrently, I kept failing to make progress on the things that really matter. And so 100 days ago, I made a decision to track every hour of my working day for the next 100 days. If you were to look at the data, the numbers appear crazy good. While there were some ups and downs, I generally did 10 to 12 hours of work every single day. In other words, I thought I was making good use of my time. But something didn't quite add up. I was logging all these hours, but I didn't feel like I was making real progress. So I started looking closer at what those hours actually represent. Take a look at this graph where I identified the hours that I was actually distracted and the hours that I was focused. As expected, I was distracted at least once every single day. And there were in fact a few days where the entire day was filled with distractions. On some days, I had less than 2 hours of focused work. The rest was multitasking, half attention, or what I can only call fake productivity, just pretending to look busy. Most of us know this by now and that we are easily distracted, but it's crazy to see the extent of it. In fact, when looking back, I realized that a lot of the work that it took me 9 to 10 hours could actually be completed in just a few hours of focused time. And you probably know this by now. It's called Parkinson's Law, the idea that work expands to fill the time available. In other words, if you give yourself 5 hours to complete a task that only takes 1, it would mysteriously take 5 hours. I also checked this by trying to understand how the duration of a task affect whether I was distracted or not. And it turns out that the longer a task took, the more likely I was to get distracted, which makes sense. It turns out that I was very good at looking busy. And while that's a good skill to have in the workplace, it's maybe not so good for your personal life, or just when you are trying to make some progress. Now, being busy isn't the same as getting stuff done. We all know this intuitively, yet most of us still do otherwise. And the reason for this is simple. Focused work is difficult. It takes a lot of attention, a lot of energy, and most of us aren't willing to commit to that at the start. In fact, the reason why we like the idea of busyness so much is because it's easier to measure time over results and to focus on maximizing the time spent. The days where I felt genuinely productive aren't the days that I spent hours on work. It was the days that I focused on one or two tasks to completion. And so the real lesson was this: I didn't need more hours, I needed more focus. I needed to protect the few hours that really mattered. The key moving forward is to set a time limit on the task that you plan to do so that it doesn't keep dragging and you are able to refocus every time that time expires. If it takes too long, wrap it up first and redefine the next task before starting again. There was another problem other than focus, and it's this: taking the right action. Because not all work is equal. Now, one of the projects that I used to work on was about building a Telegram bot, and we had to reach out to Telegram communities to ask them if they'll be interested to use it. However, instead of actually talking to people, what I did instead was research the best sales techniques to convince people to use the bot, thinking about new features that could probably make this bot more enticing to use. And sometimes creating doubt in myself about the actual usefulness of the product despite it being already proven. Notice a common pattern between them. I was not actually doing the work that I was supposed to do. I was doing everything around the work itself, not the actual work, not the actual sale. Here's the uncomfortable truth. I knew that that was happening. Some part of me always knew what task or what mattered most. I just kept choosing the comfortable task instead. Because the real task was scary, making the salesman overcoming my fear of rejection, and preparation felt safer. In addition to that, over those 100 days, I spent about 300 hours making content. And yet, I didn't gain much traction on my channel or post much videos. And through this reflection, I learned that there is a very real gap between actions and results. There is a need to continuously change your action when the results are not showing, because practice does not make perfect. And so, with a combination of avoiding what I'm supposed to do and not doing the right stuff, I had not achieved any of the 9 goals that I had in the past 2 years. And while there's no other person to blame but yourself, it's still super frustrating and upsetting to know that this happened. I think it's fair to say that most of the time, most of us know what we should be doing, but instead, we find sophisticated ways to avoid doing it. So even if you feel stuck, just keep moving, because only by continuously moving, you'll be able to get feedback on whether you're going in the right direction. So I started asking myself 2 questions every week. First, what's the one thing that I can do this week that will move my goal by the biggest amount? And then second, am I avoiding something despite knowing its importance? And if yes, why is that the case? My greatest dissatisfaction with undertaking this experiment is how unfulfilled I was with my life. So I decided to break down my hours into 9 categories and better understand how I was spending my time. The data showed that 65% of my time was spent on work and meetings, whether it's corporate work or my own side projects. 25% of time was spent on leisure, whether it's watching a Netflix video or hanging out with friends. And the remaining 10% was spent on learning, chores, and exercise. Now it's pretty obvious seeing this what's missing from the equation, and that this is probably a very unsustainable way of living. Finally, the whole point of tracking my time was so that I can identify what's wrong and then fix it. But instead, I ended up so focused on chasing the numbers that I neglected what was really important. The question I had to ask myself was not just how to get more done, but really, what do I want to do with my life? So here's the third lesson from doing this experiment. The goal of tracking your time is not to obsess over every second, but to properly navigate so that you can adjust to a life that you want to live. The biggest impact that this experiment had on me was revealing the number of lies that I tell myself every single day. If we were to look back at the data and or the 3 issues that I mentioned above, they had all the same common pattern. First, I told myself I was working hard when I was just performing to be busy. Second, I told myself I was strategic about what I was doing when I was really just avoiding what I should do. And third, I told myself that this is what success requires when I was really hiding from what I actually want from life. And there lies the common pattern, constantly lying to myself. When something doesn't go your way, you find ways to rationalize and justify it, and sometimes you end up misleading yourself for a very long time. The point of raising this up is not to shame myself or anything along those lines, but rather it's a way for us to cope with life, the uncertainty, the setbacks, the troubles that we are facing. It's the reason why we play games or watch movies, because they allow us to escape reality for that moment in time. So here's what I've come to understand. Self-deception isn't always harmful. Sometimes it protects us. It helps push us through bad times, tough times, and keeps us from falling apart. But when you're trying to change, when you're trying to track real progress, honesty or honest feedback becomes really important. And so the goal moving forward is that I'll probably still lie to myself a lot, but the important thing is to be able to catch it and try to change direction so that I can deal with it earlier better than later. And this time tracking process sorts of create that visibility to allow me to identify when I'm lying to myself. So in the end, this experiment isn't really one about productivity. It was a journey of self-reflection and looking deep into my life and how I spend my time, which is pretty indicative of who you are and who you become. You'll be surprised to see what you can learn about yourself. And that's it. Thank you for watching. If this resonated or if you have any thoughts about this, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Otherwise, catch you in the next one.